cases are recorded.
We need to quash this virus. It's not good enough for us to tread water, which is what we're doing now.
And Sydney workers and businesses urged to check their eligibility for financial aid, with Commonwealth support coming into effect tomorrow. Victorian health authorities race to get the state's outbreak under control, with more cases and exposure sites revealed. And more than 250 members of Australia's Olympic team take off for Tokyo. Good evening and a warm welcome to ABC News. I'm Mariam Saab. Sweeping new lockdown restrictions have today been announced by the New South Wales government after 3 weeks of stay-at-home orders failed to curb the state's Delta COVID outbreak. Let's take a look at where the situation stands currently. 111 new local infections were recorded today from a record of almost 82,000 tests. A man in his late 80s from southeastern Sydney has died, taking New South Wales COVID-19 death toll to 59. Of the new cases, 83 are from southwestern Sydney, while up to 39 were infectious while in the community. The state's Premier Gladys Berejiklian says that figure is causing immense concern.
This number is stubborn and it won't go down. What we've seen during the last 3 weeks of the lockdown is that we have managed not to have the thousands of cases that would have resulted had we not gone into lockdown. So we've prevented the widespread of the virus. We've prevented thousands and thousands of people being exposed to the virus and getting infected. But what we haven't managed to do is really budge that stubborn number every day for the last few days, where we need to quash this virus. It's not good enough for us to tread water, which is what we're doing now.
In an effort to rein in the outbreak, residents in 3 local government areas in Sydney southwest have been banned from leaving their areas for work. So from midnight tonight, people in the LGAs of Fairfield, Liverpool and Canterbury Bankstown will not be able to work outside their area. The only workers able to leave their homes in Fairfield, Liverpool and Canterbury Bankstown are essential health or emergency services staff. Aged care and disability workers are included in this exemption. For those that do leave their local government area, a COVID-19 test is required every 3 days, regardless of whether or not they have symptoms. Chief Health Officer Dr. Kerry Chant says the measures are necessary.
The reason we are focused on southwestern Sydney, we have focused on Sydney overall, but we've focused on southwestern Sydney because that is where the cases are coming from. That is a cause for more intense action in southwestern Sydney, but I should also say that the risk exists across Greater Sydney, and also the regions have to be incredibly vigilant if they've had any interactions, because it is necessary for key logistics, freight and other things to move. We are a very connected society, and so it is critical that everyone follows that awareness in the regional areas as well.
The state government has also announced major changes for retail premises in Greater Sydney, the Blue Mountains, Central Coast, Wollongong and Shell Harbour. From midnight, non-essential retail premises will be forced to close in-person business and can only operate via click and collect or takeaway. Shops that can still operate include supermarkets, pharmacies and chemists, petrol stations, car hire, financial institutions, hardware stores, agricultural and rural supplies, pet supplies and post offices. Now, the government has also made the decision to ban all non-essential construction work until the end of the month. Urgent repairs such as for water or electricity problems will still be permitted, but for all other tradespeople, it's tools down. Now, all of the new measures will remain in place until the 30th of July. And New South Wales Health has just released an updated list of exposure sites for Greater Sydney. They include multiple venues in Dulwich Hill in the inner west, as well as Lakemba in the southwest. For the full list, please go to the New South Wales Health site. That's at newsouthwales.gov.au. Residents of southwest Sydney are grappling with the new rules, banning them from leaving their local government area. From midnight, only essential health and emergency workers can leave. Thousands will be relying on government income support, causing concern for many in the community.
It's tough. It's really tough for our local residents in southwest Sydney. They've been feeling the weight of this pandemic and the recent outbreak. It's really doing a lot to people's mental health, and it is also doing a lot to the family budget.
I feel like we've been targeted. I went out last night for the first time in about a week, and, you know, there were police in the local shopping centres and driving through the parks, or police through the parks. This morning I woke up and there were choppers in the area. It sounds a bit dramatic, but that's the reality.
Well, I'm hopeful that, $600 a week something, but it does go up, because besides that, I guess I'm going to run out of annual leave and I don't see myself going into the clinic or seeing patients anytime soon. So I really hope there is a better chance at the money going up. And I'm still waiting to get my vaccine, even though I'm a healthcare worker. So I hope the supply goes up so we can all be safer.
I think it's going to be hard. We just have to stick to our local area. Obviously, we have to work all together to calm this Delta variant down.
Now, the federal government is dismissing suggestions it's played favourites with the states and territories hit by lockdowns when announcing financial support for people doing it tough. This comes as Scott Morrison and other world leaders pledged to boost vaccine access to developing nations, with coronavirus ripping through vulnerable countries and claiming thousands of lives. From Canberra, political reporter Matthew Doran.
The Kiwi Prime Minister with a call for cooperation.
Ultimately, we are all in this together.
Hosting a virtual summit of Asia-Pacific leaders, all still battling a virus and all of one mind, that the pandemic isn't going anywhere anytime soon.
There is significant work by all of us to be done.
APEC leaders committed to expand sharing and manufacturing of vaccines as the virus ravages countries across the region.
We see our primary task as being the expansion of the scope of vaccinations.
We must remove barriers, not erect walls.
Scott Morrison dialing in from a locked-down Kirribilli. A lack of access to vaccines in Australia blamed for leaving Sydney and Melbourne vulnerable to outbreaks after early success in controlling COVID-19 in 2020 was envied around the world.
We've squandered that advantage with a failure to roll out the vaccine effectively.
The Commonwealth argues it's stumping up financially to cushion the blow while the vaccine rollout ramps up.
Our government will stand with those that are doing it tough as a result of lockdown closures.
National Cabinet met on Friday, but leaders failed to agree on a single model for support. Labor's insisting it's not surprising states and territories still want to negotiate on a case-by-case basis, given the longer Sydney lockdown resulted in higher individual payments than the shorter Melbourne restrictions just a month earlier.
State governments have been able to start to pressure the Prime Minister to take an equitable approach.
As issues have arisen, we've adjusted our response.
The deteriorating coronavirus situation has forced leaders to accept that lockdowns are going to be unavoidable while vaccination rates remain low. Whether larger weekly deliveries of the Pfizer shot expected in coming weeks help to ease that threat will rely on how fast authorities can get those doses off of planes and into arms. Matthew Doran, ABC News, Canberra.
Police have charged 3 removalists who allegedly travelled to regional New South Wales despite knowing they had tested positive to coronavirus. Testing of close contacts has begun in the central west town of Molong, about 300 kilometres from Sydney. Police say they spoke to the men yesterday in the town after receiving information the group had allegedly travelled from West Hoxton, which is in the Liverpool local government area. The region has been identified as an area of particular concern in the latest Sydney outbreak. Victorian health authorities are on high alert as more local cases emerge on day 2 of the state's 5-day lockdown. Our reporter Margaret Paul has more from Melbourne.
Victoria's recorded 19 new cases of coronavirus across the state, and they are all linked to known outbreaks. 18 of those new cases were infectious while in the community for some time, but authorities were keen to point out today that on average each case only spent 1.5 days in the community while infectious. Nonetheless, Victorians are being urged to keep an eye on that list of exposure sites because it is being updated very regularly. There are now 10,000 primary close contacts across Victoria. That is a lot of people in isolation across the state. Now, as I said, those cases are all linked to known outbreaks. So among today's new cases, we've had new cases that are linked to the MCG cluster, and some people who travelled from Melbourne to Phillip Island in regional Victoria for a weekend, and there's a list of exposure sites associated with that trip to Phillip Island. So people who've spent time on Phillip Island are being urged to check that and get a test as well. There'll be more testing on Phillip Island. So there's now 165 exposure alerts across Victoria, and some of those new ones include Phillip Island. As I said, there are a number of places there to keep a lookout for. A gym in Richmond, and there's a city office tower in the Docklands that was added overnight as well. Now, we're all keen to know here in Victoria, we're on day 2 of what was meant to be a 5-day lockdown, so we're all really keen to know what today's numbers mean for whether that lockdown might be extended or whether it will lift on Tuesday, as was flagged when it was introduced. But the Chief Health Officer, Professor Brett Sutton, said that kind of question is like asking for a horoscope.
There's enormous frustration for all of us, absolutely everyone in Victoria, around the uncertainty with this virus. But you know, you might as well read a horoscope to be able to predict how things might look 3 days from now. We're on a really good trajectory in terms of having every case linked, but we don't know what's around the corner necessarily. Those super spreading events are becoming more common with the Delta variant. The transmission within any kind of indoor setting is much higher than we've seen previously, and the same for households.
Now, regional Victoria as well will be looking particularly at those cases around Phillip Island. There were also cases in Balan, Bacchus Marsh and Ballarat that we've heard of over the past few days, because regional Victorians were told if things go well, they could be lifted from the lockdown earlier than Melbourne. But when we spoke to the Health Minister today, he said, again, it is really too early to tell. They're looking at all the data that comes in as it comes in, so we are just going to have to stay tuned.
The escalating coronavirus outbreaks in New South Wales and Victoria have again prompted other states to tighten their borders. From midnight, Tasmania will declare all of New South Wales high risk. The state is already closed to Victoria. Western Australia's hard border with Victoria is now in force, meaning only exempt travellers are allowed in. In South Australia, it's shut out to all of Victoria, requiring 14 days of quarantine and mandatory testing. The state's police commissioner warned any South Australians in Victoria to come home immediately.
We'll be continually monitoring the situation in Victoria, and it is likely that early next week we will make further changes which will even prevent returning South Australians from coming in without applying for a specific exemption from SA Health. I think this gives you some indication as to the level of concern we have for the situation interstate and the steps we're taking to prevent the possibility of spread of COVID-19 and the Delta variant into South Australia, and also to enable us to minimise the need for further restrictions on the South Australian community.
For Victorians in Western Australia, it was a scramble to get home before the border shut at midnight last night.
Yes, I had to apply for exemption. I think a lot of ours got actually declined as we were taking off, so it was crazy. Luckily we had Wi-Fi, so got to apply on the plane, but yeah, it's been a pretty crazy process, but yeah, we're here, so I'm very happy to be home.
Yeah, I think we were a bit worried at one point, but we just changed our flight from Monday to Saturday just to ensure we got here safely.
We got a text message from WA Police last night just advising that the original pass that we'd applied for would be revoked and we'd have to reapply, so we just did that before we went to bed, and then early in the morning it came through and said it had been approved. So pretty good process, I have to say. So
When you saw that the hard border had come down, were you worried?
Yes, I was, because I've only just left for Melbourne a few days ago, and then yeah, so it's my 7th quarantine now.
Well, during the latest COVID outbreaks, we've seen a number of cases where people who've been fully vaccinated have tested positive for coronavirus. Initially, it was the residents of aged care homes, then a nurse at Westmead Hospital and the worker at Brisbane Airport. Jeremy Fernandez looks at how effective the vaccines are against the Delta virus.
More and more of us are getting vaccinated, and while a single dose offers some protection, you're only considered fully vaccinated after you've had both doses, plus an extra 2 weeks after your second dose to be fully immune for the vaccine to really kick in. To help explain the effectiveness of vaccines, let's talk about baseball.
That's a rocket. Giddy up, baby. Giddy up. God, we got a ball game.
In May, one player and 8 other staff from the New York Yankees all tested positive for COVID-19, despite everyone on the team being fully vaccinated. That's right, they were vaccinated and 9 people still got the virus. The outbreak is thought to have started with the third base coach Phil Nevin. It's possible that his vaccine failed. He became mildly ill. 7 of the cases were other coaches or team officials. And then there was Gleyber Torres, the shortstop.
What a play by Gleyber Torres.
Of those cases, 7 showed no symptoms at all. The last case had only mild symptoms. But the fact that 9 people out of 60 caught the disease in the first place still seems pretty high. That's 15% of the team. Now, let's rewind a year to a time before most people in the US were vaccinated.
There are serious questions about whether Major League Baseball can go on.
In 2020, there were similar outbreaks in 2 other American baseball teams. In July, 18 players and 2 coaches from the Miami Marlins tested positive. Soon after that, the St. Louis Cardinals had an outbreak of their own, with 10 players and 2 staff. That's about 30 to 40% of those teams. Now, if the Yankees had the same rate of transmission, it wouldn't have been just 9 cases, it would have been 24. And that suggests vaccines are cutting the risk of transmission by half. That figure has been backed up by studies from the UK and Israel. There's similar data here in Australia too. Of the 40 people who attended a party at Hoxton Park during Sydney's outbreak, 7 people who'd been vaccinated never got sick. The rest had not been vaccinated. 30 caught the disease, only 3 escaped. If you've had both doses, waited for 2 weeks and then still get the virus, you're what's called a breakthrough case. Breakthrough cases are expected because vaccines are never 100% foolproof. There are also different levels of immunity with all vaccines: effective immunity and sterilising immunity. Sterilising immunity is the gold standard and it's very difficult to achieve. This is when the vaccine acts so quickly that the virus particles are neutralised the moment they enter our bodies. But most vaccines only achieve effective immunity. In these cases, the virus can get into our systems and enter our cells and even start to replicate. But that's when the antibodies generated by the vaccines get to work, preventing the virus from becoming an infection. What it means is that you'll end up with a milder case, or might even have no symptoms at all. And that's what happened with the New York Yankees.
Yankees win.
The vaccines are proving highly successful in preventing hospitalisations, severe symptoms and death, but they don't stop the disease from being passed around. So until more of us are vaccinated, there remains a risk.
Heading overseas, the death toll is rising after the worst floods in a generation swept through Germany, Belgium and the Netherlands. Local authorities have confirmed at least 120 people in Western Europe have died, but several hundred more remain missing. As residents mourn the losses, the government has blamed a rapidly heating climate for the disaster. Europe correspondent Linton Besser reports.
Homes and lives washed away in the worst flooding in Germany in living memory. This man from Rheinbach had to climb out of his window and onto his roof to survive.
Here you can see how high the water was. All the furniture was floating around. Everything electric is ruined.
In Erfstadt, several residents died when a sinkhole opened beneath the town, swallowing homes and farmland. The grim story was repeated across Western Germany, with torrential summer rain overwhelming the defences of more than 20 cities.
Once the river started overflowing and the water came down from the hillside, it was a matter of 2 minutes before the yard was flooded waist high with water. We had to get out through the window and over the roof in order to save ourselves.
A rising death toll has shocked the nation, with many hundreds still unaccounted for.
It is therefore already clear today that our state is experiencing a flood disaster of historic dimensions.
The German government has blamed a rapidly heating planet for the tragedy and pledged to do more to combat climate change.
Only if we take up the fight against climate change decisively will we be able to keep extreme weather conditions such as these in check.
As you know, the government has set itself many goals in this regard because we can't go into the future and keep experiencing events like this.
It is the intensity and the length of these events where science tells us this is a clear indication of climate change.
Swathes of Western Europe received 2 months of rain in just 2 days. The floods also devastated parts of the Netherlands and Belgium.
Our shop has been open for 3 years. We got through the renovations, we got through COVID. We were hoping to get back on our feet, and now this.
In Brussels, the government has declared July 20 a national day of mourning.
We're still awaiting the final figures, but it appears these floods are the most catastrophic our country has ever seen.
There are fears some reservoirs and dams remain on the verge of collapse, and the search for survivors goes on. Meanwhile, thousands of soldiers and emergency workers have now joined a massive clean-up operation. The rain is forecast to ease this weekend. Linton Besser, ABC News.
Firefighters in the United States are battling to control a raging bushfire in Oregon that's spreading rapidly in windy conditions. It's the largest of 70 major fires burning across the country. Around 5,000 homes and buildings are under threat. Australia's top athletes have departed the tropical city of Cairns and are on the way to Tokyo ahead of this year's Olympic Games. The far north Queensland city was chosen as the Olympic and Paralympic pre-departure training camp due to its climate being similar to the Japanese capital at this time of year. Australian Olympic team deputy chef de mission Susie O'Neill is accompanying over 250 athletes and officials from swimming, rowing, hockey, water polo, beach volleyball, table tennis, weightlifting and badminton.
It's going to be such a different experience for the athletes, but I'm just so happy that it's going ahead. We're flying over today with the first of the Qantas charters, and we're all so excited to get over there.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic to finally be leaving and have so many people come out and wish as well. It's really exciting. We're very proud to be part of any Olympic team, and the fact it's the largest one's really, really great. And I mean, for us, beach volleyball hasn't been in the Olympics since 2008, so it's been 13 years. So for us personally, it's excited that as beach volleyball for the males that we can come back and be part of that larger team again.
Well, a major COVID scare has rocked the Tokyo Olympics with an infection inside the athletes' village. It comes just hours out from the largest contingent of Aussie athletes touching down there. Let's go straight now to our North Asia correspondent, Jake Sturmer, who is at Narita Airport. Jake, what more do we know about the positive case?
Mariam, we know that this positive case was a member of a foreign delegation, a staff member and not an athlete and not an Australian. But it is the first positive case from inside the village from the Games themselves, now that the athletes' village is actually open. 2 contractors earlier this month actually tested positive, but the village was not operational. So what this is showing is that the threat from COVID is now very real and also inside the athletes' village. The Olympic organisers Toshiro Muto spoke a short time ago. Let's take a listen.
It has been reported for the first time, one person who was in the athletes' village has been infected with coronavirus. This person tested positive in the PCR test yesterday, and right now this person is confined in a hotel.
And Jake, there's already been heightened concern and risk of COVID over there, the Delta variant in particular. What's the sentiment at the moment?
Indeed, Mariam. Well, there is a degree of anxiety here in Japan, and especially in Tokyo. The Tokyo that the athletes will come from here. As we can see, one of the delegations coming through now. They'll come through just like this. They will then, they will have already done PCR tests, a lot of paperwork. They'll get straight onto a bus and go into that athletes' village. But outside of that athletes' village, there is some anxiety and alarm about coronavirus because the Tokyo that the athletes will be coming to has just recorded another significant number of infections, more than 1,400 new infections. And over the last few days, the capital has recorded thousands of new infections, many of which are the Delta variant. So the organisers say that the Olympic bubble will be safe and secure and that there is zero risk. Not everyone is convinced. Health experts say you can never promise zero risk. So there is a degree of alarm and uncertainty and worry that the Olympics could become a super spreader event. Of course, the hope is that that does not happen.
A very different games this pandemic year. Thank you. Reporting there, Jake Sturmer in Narita, Japan. In the AFL, Port Adelaide has beaten St Kilda by 13 points. Playing to empty stadium at Docklands, Port booted 3 goals in the second quarter to enter half-time with a 7-point lead. The Saints managed to level the score and looked set for a final term comeback, but 3 late goals sealed Power's 74-61 victory. Let's take a look at the satellite. A vigorous front and trough are generating powerful winds and gusty showers over South Australia, Tasmania, Victoria and New South Wales. Cool onshore winds are bringing a few showers to Western Australia's southwest, while high pressure is keeping central and northern Australia dry. Looking around the country for tomorrow next, mostly sunny in Queensland with a bit of morning frost there in the southwest. Cool temperatures for New South Wales and the ACT, windy in the north with snow on the Alps. In Victoria, cold right across the state, showers clearing in the south. Turning to Tasmania, morning frost to make way for a sunny day in the north, showers across the southern areas. A cloudy day in South Australia, late showers in the southeast, cold elsewhere. For Western Australia, cool to cold across the state, rain ahead for southern areas. And the Northern Territory will have a warm day with temperatures there reaching a top of 35 degrees. Looking ahead to Monday's forecast for our capital cities, mostly sunny in Brisbane, cloudy in Sydney and Canberra, Melbourne a possible shower, cloudy in Hobart, a 90% chance of rain for Adelaide, potential showers there in Perth and a sunny day for Darwin. Well, that is the latest from ABC News. Remember, you can keep up to date at news.abc.net.au and on iView. I'm Mariam Saab. Stay with us. Backroads is coming up next.